All right, welcome. In this explainer, we are getting right to the heart of one of the biggest questions at work. What really motivates people to do great work? We're going to break down the science behind motivation, moving from the old playbook to the new. So let's jump right in.
So, let's kick things off with a question that's probably on everyone's mind. You've heard it, you've probably thought it yourself. Is just throwing more money at people the best way to unlock their potential? I mean, it seems logical, right? The common belief is pretty simple. More pay equals better work. But the reality? Well, it's way more complicated. And honestly, a lot more interesting. Money is definitely a powerful tool, don't get me wrong, but it's just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. To really understand that puzzle, we first have to look at what I'm calling the old playbook. These are the traditional ways we use money to reward people, and we're going to see why these methods have some serious limitations. First up, you've got the most basic level of reward, pay for membership and seniority. Think of this as your fixed salary, or those yearly cost of living increases. Basically, it's pay for showing up and for sticking around, not necessarily for knocking it out of the park. And here's the real trade-off. Sure, this kind of pay can get people in the door and convince them not to leave, but it does very little to motivate actual day-to-day performance. In fact, it can create what we call golden handcuffs, where people, even poor performers, stick around just because the pay is safe and comfortable. Okay, so moving up the ladder, we have job status wards. This is the idea that the corner office, the bigger title, and the higher rank, well, they all come with a bigger paycheck and better perks. It's all about rewarding your position in the company food chain. And man, is this a double-edged sword. On one hand, yeah, it totally motivates people to compete and try to climb that ladder. But that climb can get pretty ugly. It can lead to a culture of bureaucracy, people hoarding resources, and just plain unhealthy competition instead of collaboration. So the key point is, we're still not directly motivating great work itself. All right, so let's get closer to what really matters. Rewards that are actually tied to performance. And these tend to come in three main flavors. You've got individual rewards like bonuses or commissions, then there are team-based rewards, and finally, you have organizational rewards that everyone gets a piece of like profit sharing or stock options. A fantastic real-world example of an organizational reward is when Delta Airlines gave a bonus worth about 2 months' pay to every single employee. That's amazing, right? But here's the catch with these big company-wide rewards. There's often a really weak link between your individual effort and that final payout. It's just hard to see how your specific hard work today really moved the needle on that bonus a year from now. And this brings us to a major turning point in our story. We've seen the limits of the old playbook, so now let's shift gears to the new playbook. This is all about moving away from just paying for performance and moving toward designing work that is naturally, intrinsically motivating. For over a century, the main idea was job specialization. Just break down work into tiny, repetitive, super efficient tasks. The classic assembly line is the perfect example. And look, this approach definitely boosted efficiency, but it came at a huge cost. Rock bottom motivation, people calling in sick all the time, and high turnover, because the work was just mind-numbingly boring. The answer to that big problem is found in a really elegant idea, the job characteristics model. Think of this as the blueprint for engineering motivation directly into a job. It shows us how the core features of the work itself can create the psychological conditions that lead to really positive outcomes. So what are these secret ingredients? Well, the model points to 5 key things. First is skill variety, which is just about using a range of your talents, not just one over and over. Then there's task identity. That's being able to see a project through from start to finish. Third is task significance, knowing your work actually matters to other people. Then you have autonomy, which is the freedom and control over how you do your work. And finally, there's job feedback, getting clear, direct info on how well you're doing. And when you get these 5 ingredients mixed together in the right way, just look at the results you can get. High intrinsic motivation. That means the drive comes from the work itself, which leads to better performance and a really deep satisfaction with the work. The job literally becomes its own reward. Here's a perfect example of this in action. In the old specialized model, you'd have 3 different people: a camera operator, a sound technician, and a reporter. The new model combines them all into one role, the video journalist. This single job is packed with skill variety, it has a super clear task identity, they see the story all the way through, and they have a ton of autonomy out in the field. Now, when jobs are designed this well, they don't just motivate people, they empower them. And this next part is all about that incredible feeling, what we call psychological empowerment. It's the true engine of our inner drive. See, empowerment isn't just some fluffy corporate buzzword. It's a specific feeling that's made up of four distinct parts. First is self-determination. That's the feeling of control. Then there's meaning, which is the belief that your work is genuinely important. You also need competence, which is just self-belief in your skills. And finally, impact, knowing you're making a real difference. When you feel all four of those, you are truly empowered. So how do you actually create this feeling of empowerment? Well, it's really a three-part strategy. First, you have to design the job right, using all those principles we just talked about. Second, the organization has to provide resources, and this is crucial. It has to trust its people. And third, you have to make sure that individuals have the skills and the confidence they need to meet the challenge. Okay, this brings us to our final and most advanced level. Once you've got a well-designed job and you feel a genuine sense of empowerment, the final step is to master the art of leading yourself. This is the pro-level playbook. Take someone like orthopedic surgeon Sarah Call. She works in an incredibly high-stakes, high-pressure environment. To perform at her best, she relies on self-leadership techniques, things like constructive self-talk and mentally rehearsing a procedure before she even begins. She is actively and consciously directing her own motivation and focus.
And that is exactly what self-leadership is. It's that whole collection of strategies you use to manage your own thoughts and actions so you can achieve your goals. It's about becoming your own boss, your own coach, and maybe your own biggest supporter. And the great news is these are concrete practices that anyone can develop. It's about setting your own personal goals, managing that inner critic with positive self-talk, visualizing success, building small natural rewards into your daily work, tracking your own progress, and celebrating your own wins. These are skills, and like any skill, they can absolutely be learned. So think about the journey we've just taken. We've gone from external motivators like pay to the idea of jobs that motivate themselves, and finally to the idea that we can motivate ourselves from the inside out, which leaves us with a really fascinating final question to think about. If everyone becomes a master of self-leadership, what does the future of management even look like?